John Bell's hands trembled as he fastened the last clasp on his sterilized protective suit. The gravity of his mission weighed heavily on his mind. He was about to become one of the first human males to milk Barzan females, a task crucial to their species' survival. The sterile chamber hummed with nervous energy as a group of Barzan females entered, their swollen mammary glands visibly distended beneath their clothing. John swallowed hard, his military training kicking in as he pushed aside his discomfort. He was here to save lives, no matter how unconventional the method. Ivy, his Barzan liaison, stepped forward. Her violet eyes locked onto John's, conveying a mix of desperation and hope. "Remember, John," she said, her voice low and urgent, "without your assistance, our species faces extinction within a generation. The fluid buildup is already causing severe health complications in many of our females." John nodded, recalling the classified briefing he'd received before leaving Earth. The Barzan homeworld was in crisis, their females suffering from a mysterious condition that only human male pheromones could alleviate. It was a vulnerability the Barzan government had been reluctant to reveal, agreeing to share advanced technology with Earth in exchange for this most intimate form of aid. As John approached the first Barzan female, he couldn't help but notice the protest visible through the chamber's windows. Barzan males, feeling emasculated and threatened by the humans' arrival, brandished signs and shouted slogans. Security forces struggled to maintain order as saboteurs targeted vital equipment. John pushed the distractions from his mind, focusing on the task at hand. He placed his hands gently on the Barzan female's swollen glands, noting the look of relief that washed over her face as his touch triggered the release of built-up fluid. The process was far more intimate than he'd anticipated, requiring not just medical precision, but also emotional support. As he moved from one Barzan to the next, John became acutely aware of the complex emotions at play. Some females averted their eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the necessity of this foreign touch. Others, like Ivy, seemed to be developing a strong attachment to their human milkers. John felt a twinge of unease at the diplomatic complications this could cause. In the back of his mind, John couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this crisis than met the eye. The cause of the Barzan female's condition remained a mystery, and hints of a deeper conspiracy nagged at him. Were the motives of his own government as altruistic as they claimed? And what of his Barzan hosts? As Earth pushed for an expanded human presence on the Barzan homeworld, tensions with other alien races rose. The arrangement was viewed with suspicion across the galaxy, and John found himself at the center of a political powder keg. Completing his first session, John stepped back, his suit stained with the milky fluid. He caught Ivy's eye, noting the mix of gratitude and something deeper in her gaze. As he prepared for the next group, John steeled himself for the challenges ahead. He was no longer just a former military medic. He was now a crucial player in an interstellar drama, with the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. The weight of his responsibility settled on John's shoulders as he realized this was only the beginning. The true test lay ahead, navigating the physical demands of his role, the emotional minefield of interspecies intimacy, and the growing web of political intrigue that threatened to engulf both Earth and the Barzan homeworld. As the days turned into weeks, John found himself settling into a routine on the Barzan homeworld. The sterile chamber became a second home, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he tended to the Barzan females. Yet despite the familiarity of his tasks, each session brought new challenges and unexpected developments. Ivy's presence was a constant, her violet eyes watching John's every move with growing interest. Their professional relationship began to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Shared glances lingered longer, their conversations extending beyond the clinical nature of their work. One evening, as John finished his shift, Ivy approached him in the compound's corridor. "John," she said, her voice low, "I've noticed something different about some of the females, including myself. The effects of your treatment seem to be changing." John nodded, relieved to hear his own observations confirmed. "I've seen it too. There are physiological changes I can't explain. It's as if your bodies are adapting to our pheromones in unexpected ways." Ivy's eyes widened. "What does this mean for us? For my people?" Before John could respond, a thunderous explosion rocked the compound. Alarms blared as security personnel rushed past them. Through the windows, they could see a plume of smoke rising from the eastern perimeter. "The protests," John muttered, his heart racing. "They've escalated." Ivy grabbed his arm, her grip tight with fear. "We need to get you to safety. The anti-human sentiment is reaching a boiling point." As they hurried through the corridors, John's mind raced. The arrival of additional human volunteers had only inflamed tensions further. Each day brought new acts of sabotage and intimidation. Equipment mysteriously malfunctioned, supply shipments went missing, and human workers reported being followed and harassed when they ventured outside the compound. They reached the secure inner chambers just as another explosion shook the building. John's comm link crackled to life, the voice of his Earth liaison cutting through the chaos. "Bell, we've got a situation. The Galactic Council is sending representatives to investigate our arrangement with the Brazans. This attack couldn't have come at a worse time." John exchanged a worried glance with Ivy. The political implications were clear. Earth's expanding presence on the Barzan homeworld was drawing unwanted attention from other alien races. In the days that followed, John found himself working double shifts, struggling to keep up with the demand for treatment, while also collecting data on the physiological changes he'd observed. Late one night, as he pored over his findings, an encrypted message flashed across his datapad. Ivy appeared at his side, her face a mask of concern. "John, I intercepted something. A transmission between our officials and someone off-world. They mentioned Phase 1 being successful and Phase 2 preparations." John's blood ran cold. "This goes deeper than we thought. We need to investigate, but it could be dangerous. Are you sure you want to be involved?" Ivy's response was immediate. "My people's future is at stake. I'm with you." Their clandestine investigation led them to the restricted medical archives, where they made a startling discovery. Records of genetic experiments conducted on Barzan females decades ago revealed the true source of the current crisis. As John and Ivy delved deeper into the conspiracy, the lines between ally and enemy blurred. They uncovered evidence that factions within both the Barzan and Earth governments were manipulating the situation, their ultimate goal still unclear. Their world was thrown into further chaos when Dr. Zorn, a Barzan scientist John had heard whispers about, requested a secret meeting. In a dimly lit laboratory on the outskirts of the main city, Zorn revealed his team's work on a synthetic compound to replace human pheromones. "We need your help, John," Zorn pleaded, his eyes fever-bright with desperation. "This could end the crisis without further entangling our species, but those in power are suppressing our research." John's mind reeled with the implications. The official program he'd been part of, the intimate connections he'd formed with the Barzan females, all of it could be based on a lie. Yet the potential consequences of exposing the truth or pursuing Zorn's alternative solution were equally daunting. As he left the meeting, John's comm link chimed with an urgent message. The Galactic Council's representatives had arrived, their sleek ship casting an ominous shadow over the compound. John looked at Ivy, seeing his own turmoil reflected in her eyes. They stood at a crossroads, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. Whatever choice they made, there would be no turning back. John's mind raced as he left Dr. Zorn's clandestine meeting, the weight of newfound knowledge pressing heavily upon him. He glanced at Ivy, her violet eyes mirroring his own conflicted emotions. The Galactic Council representative's ship loomed overhead, a stark reminder of the complex political web they were entangled in. "We need to act quickly," John whispered, pulling Ivy into a secluded alcove. "Dr. Zorn's synthetic compound could be the key to ending this crisis without further compromising your people or mine." Ivy nodded, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "But how can we pursue this while maintaining your official duties? The risks are enormous, John." "We'll have to be careful," he replied, his voice low and determined. "I'll continue the milking program as normal, but we'll use that as cover to investigate Zorn's solution." Over the next few days, John found himself living a double life. By day, he performed his official duties in the sterile chamber, his hands moving with practiced efficiency over the Barzan females or his swollen glands. But in stolen moments between shifts, he slipped away to Zorn's hidden laboratory beneath the city. The underground facility hummed with nervous energy as John worked alongside the Barzan scientists. Holographic displays flickered with complex molecular structures, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of chemicals. The compound mimics human pheromones, Zorn explained, his eyes bright with excitement. But it goes further, potentially reversing the genetic alterations that caused this crisis in the first place. John watched in amazement as a small group of volunteer Barzan females underwent the experimental treatment. Their relief was palpable, the painful swelling in their mammary glands visibly diminishing. One evening, as protests raged in the streets above, John turned to Ivy. "I think it's time," he said softly. "Will you undergo the treatment?" Ivy hesitated, fear flashing across her features. "What if something goes wrong?" John took her hand, his touch gentle yet reassuring. "I'll be with you every step of the way." As Ivy began the treatment, John found himself growing increasingly protective. He spent every free moment by her side, monitoring her vitals and offering comfort. The intimacy of their connection deepened, transcending the physical nature of their initial relationship. However, their progress was soon threatened by the arrival of Commander Vex, a stern-faced Earth military official. Vex's suspicious gaze followed John's every move, his presence a constant reminder of the precarious nature of their secret operation. "Bell," Vex barked one day, cornering John in a corridor. "Your unauthorized absences have been noted. Care to explain?" John's heart raced, but he maintained a calm facade. "Just trying to understand the Barzan physiology better, sir. It helps with the efficiency of the milking process." Vex's eyes narrowed, clearly unconvinced. "See that you don't overstep your bounds, Bell. We're here to do a job, not go native." As John navigated this new threat, the situation on the Barzan homeworld deteriorated rapidly. Anti-human protests turned violent, with several of John's colleagues injured in targeted attacks. The arrival of Earth's military contingent only fueled the flames of discontent. Amidst the chaos, a new player emerged. Krell, a charismatic Barzan male, led a group of radicals in a daring coup attempt. They seized control of the main milking centers, taking both human and Barzan hostages. John watched in horror as the news spread across the compound screens. Ivy gripped his arm, her face pale with shock. "John, we have to do something." His military training kicking in, John formulated a plan. "I'm going in," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I can gather intelligence, maybe even free some hostages." "It's too dangerous," Ivy protested, but John could see the resignation in her eyes. She knew he had to try. Using his knowledge of Barzan physiology and the compound's layout, John managed to infiltrate one of the seized centers. The air inside was thick with tension, and the sound of frightened whimpers echoed through the halls. As he crept through the facility, John overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Krell's insurgents weren't acting alone. They had support from both Earth and Barzan officials who stood to profit from the ongoing crisis. John's mind reeled at the implications. He had to get this information out, but as he turned to leave, he found himself face to face with a group of armed insurgents. Time seemed to slow as John assessed his options, his heart pounding in his ears. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the other end of the corridor. Ivy burst onto the scene, leading a team of loyal Barzan security personnel. In the ensuing chaos, John and Ivy fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if they'd trained together for years. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as they made their way to the exit, covering each other at every turn. As they finally broke free of the facility, John clutched the data drive containing the damning evidence. He looked at Ivy, her face streaked with sweat and grime, and felt a surge of admiration and something deeper. "We did it," he breathed, barely able to believe their narrow escape. Ivy's violet eyes met his, a mix of relief and commitment in her gaze. "This is just the beginning, John. We have the truth now. But what do we do with it?" John nodded grimly, acutely aware of the dangers that still surrounded them. Krell's insurgents, corrupt officials, and Commander Vex's suspicion all posed immediate threats. As they hurried through the darkened streets, John's mind raced with possibilities and potential pitfalls. Their next move would be crucial, not just for their own survival, but for the fate of two worlds caught in a web of deceit and manipulation. The weight of responsibility settled on John's shoulders as he realized that unraveling this conspiracy might be the only way to secure a future for both humanity and the Brazan species. John and Ivy moved swiftly through the darkened streets, their hearts pounding with the weight of the information they now possessed. The data drive felt heavy in John's pocket, its contents potentially explosive enough to shake the foundations of two worlds. As they rounded a corner, a shadowy figure stepped out from an alleyway. John tensed, ready for a fight, but Ivy placed a cautionary hand on his arm. "Dr. Zorn," she whispered, her violet eyes wide with surprise. The Brazan scientist nodded, his features barely visible in the dim light. "Quickly," he urged, gesturing to a concealed entrance in the side of a nearby building. "It's not safe out here." John hesitated, his military instincts screaming caution, but Ivy's gentle tug on his sleeve convinced him. They followed Zorn into a hidden bunker, the entrance sealing silently behind them. Inside, the air was cool and still. Holographic displays flickered to life, illuminating the space with a soft blue glow. John's eyes darted around, taking in the advanced equipment and data terminals. "What is this place?" he asked, unable to keep the awe from his voice. Zorn moved to a central console, his fingers flying over the controls. "A sanctuary," he replied, "and perhaps our last hope." As John and Ivy shared their findings, Zorn's expression grew increasingly grave. The scientist pulled up additional data on the screens, filling in the gaps in their knowledge. "It's worse than we thought," Zorn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The conspiracy extends far beyond Earth and Barzan. Look at this." A complex network of connections appeared on the main display, linking various officials, corporations, and shadowy entities. At the center of it all was a name that sent a chill down John's spine: Galactic Futures. "They're not just interested in the milking program," Ivy gasped, her eyes wide as she absorbed the information. "This is about genetic modification on a massive scale." John felt a wave of nausea as he realized the full implications. "They've been using the crisis as cover for their experiments," he said, his fists clenching at his sides. "But why? What's their endgame?" Before Zorn could respond, a new figure entered the room. John instinctively moved to shield Ivy, but Zorn held up a placating hand. "This is Dr. Lyra," he explained. "She's been working on a solution to our problem." The Brazan woman nodded in greeting, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "I've developed a modified version of the synthetic compound," she said, moving to a nearby workstation. "It has the potential to not only treat the symptoms, but reverse the genetic alterations entirely." John felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "That's incredible," he breathed, "but how can we be sure it works?" Dr. Lyra's gaze met his, steady and determined. "We need a human test subject," she said. "The compound must be calibrated to work with your pheromones." The implications hung heavy in the air. John looked at Ivy, saw the fear and concern in her eyes, and made his decision. "I'll do it," he said, stepping forward. "Whatever it takes to end this crisis." The next few hours passed in a blur of medical equipment and nervousness. John lay on an examination table, his body connected to various monitoring devices as Dr. Lyra administered the compound. The effect was immediate and intense. John's body felt like it was on fire, every nerve ending screaming as the compound coursed through his system. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the urge to cry out. Ivy never left his side, her cool hand gripping his, her voice a soothing anchor in the storm of sensation. "Stay with me, John," she murmured. "You're doing great." As the initial shock subsided, John became aware of subtle changes in his body. His senses seemed sharper, more attuned to his surroundings. He could detect the faintest trace of Ivy's unique scent, could hear the rapid beating of her heart. Dr. Lyra monitored the readings closely, her expression a mix of excitement and concentration. "It's working," she announced. "The compound is integrating with his system, enhancing his natural pheromones." John sat up slowly, marveling at the new sensations coursing through him. He looked at Ivy, saw the relief and something deeper in her eyes. Their connection, already strong, felt even more profound now. The moment was shattered by the sound of an alarm. Zorn rushed to a nearby terminal, his fingers flying over the controls. "We've been discovered," he said, his voice tight with tension. "Commander Vex has declared you a traitor, John. He's mobilizing Earth forces to find you." John's mind raced, assessing their options. They had the evidence. They had a potential solution to the crisis, but they were now fugitives with powerful enemies closing in. As if in response to their predicament, a new alert flashed across the screens, a message encrypted and urgent from an unknown source. Zorn's eyes widened as he decrypted the transmission. "It's from an Earth intelligence operative," he said, disbelief evident in his voice. "Someone named Sarah Robertson. She says she wants to help." John and Ivy exchanged glances, hope and wariness warring in their expressions. They had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened two worlds, developed a potential solution, and now faced danger from all sides. As the bunker hummed with nervous energy, John realized that their next move would be crucial. With enemies closing in and uncertain allies emerging from the shadows, they would need all their skills, newfound abilities, and trust in each other to navigate the perilous path ahead. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking, ticking. John took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred, and he stumbled, nearly collapsing to the floor. Ivy caught him, her face etched with concern. "John, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. He tried to respond, but his words came out slurred and incoherent. His body felt like it was on fire, every nerve ending screaming in protest. The experimental serum was taking its toll, far more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. "We need to get him to a medical facility now," Dr. Zorn exclaimed, rushing to John's side. Agent Sarah Robertson, who had been monitoring the situation from a nearby console, sprang into action. "I know a place," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "A hidden medical facility not far from here. We can treat him there without risk of discovery." With Ivy and Dr. Zorn supporting John's weight, the group hurried through a series of hidden passageways. John's condition deteriorated with each step, his skin burning to the touch, his breathing labored and erratic. They emerged into a small hangar where a sleek, unmarked transport waited. Agent Robertson took the controls, piloting the craft with expert precision through the chaotic Barzan skies. Outside, the world was in turmoil. Krell's insurgency had gained significant ground, with major cities falling under rebel control. The Barzan government had gone into hiding, and the human embassy was under siege. As they approached Dr. Zorn's hidden facility, a massive ship appeared in the upper atmosphere. "The Galactic Council," Robertson explained, her eyes fixed on the approaching structure. "They've sent a peacekeeping fleet. The situation has escalated beyond our control." They landed at the facility, a nondescript building nestled in a remote valley. Dr. Lyra was waiting for them, her medical team already prepared. They whisked John away to an advanced treatment room, leaving Ivy pacing anxiously in the corridor. Hours passed as Dr. Lyra worked tirelessly to counteract the serum's effects. Ivy refused to leave, keeping a constant vigil outside the treatment room. She watched through an observation window as John's body convulsed, fighting against the invasive compound. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, John's vitals stabilized. Dr. Lyra emerged, exhaustion evident on her face. "He's stable," she announced, "but the serum has had some unexpected effects. We won't know the full extent until he regains consciousness." Ivy rushed to John's bedside, taking his hand in hers. His skin was cool now, the fever having broken, but there was something different about him. A subtle change in his scent, barely perceptible but unmistakably present. As John slowly regained consciousness, the facility's alarms blared to life. Dr. Zorn's voice came over the intercom, urgent and alarmed. "We have intruders. Krell's forces have found us." John's eyes snapped open, instantly alert despite his ordeal. He sat up, ignoring Ivy's protests, and took in his surroundings. Something was different. His senses felt sharper, more attuned to every minute detail of his environment. A group of Barzan insurgents burst into the room, led by a fierce-looking female named Vera. But as they approached, something strange happened. The female Barzan stumbled, their eyes glazing over as if intoxicated. John realized with a start that it was him. His pheromones, exponentially enhanced by the serum, were overwhelming the Barzan females. Vera dropped her weapon, swaying on her feet as she stared at John with a mixture of confusion and desire. Taking advantage of the situation, Ivy and John quickly subdued the incapacitated insurgents. As Vera came to her senses, John approached her carefully. "Tell us what you know," he said, his voice low and commanding. "What are Krell's plans?" Unable to resist the influence of John's enhanced pheromones, Vera spilled everything. She revealed the location of Krell's secret base, hidden deep in a treacherous mountain range. More importantly, she disclosed the true extent of Galactic Future's involvement and their horrifying plans. "They're developing a bioweapon," Vera said, her voice trembling. "Something designed to wipe out humans on the Barzan homeworld. But that's not all. They're conducting genetic experiments, trying to create some kind of hybrid army." John exchanged a grim look with Ivy. The situation was far worse than they had imagined. With this new intelligence, they knew they had to act fast. Agent Robertson joined them, her expression serious. "We need to stop Krell and expose this conspiracy to the Galactic Council," she said. "It's the only way to end this crisis and prevent further bloodshed." John nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We infiltrate Krell's base," he said, his voice firm with persistence. "We neutralize the bioweapon threat and use their own communication array to broadcast the evidence across the galaxy." As the team prepared for their daring mission, John couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. His newly enhanced abilities would be put to the ultimate test, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. With Ivy by his side and their allies ready for action, they set out towards Krell's mountain fortress, knowing that the most dangerous part of their journey was yet to come. The team's journey to Krell's mountain fortress was fraught with danger. They navigated treacherous terrain, evading patrols and automated defense systems. John's enhanced senses proved invaluable, allowing him to detect threats long before they became visible. As they approached the fortress, Ivy noticed John's growing discomfort. "Are you all right?" she whispered, concern etched on her face. John nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. "The serum, it's intensifying. I can feel everything so acutely." They infiltrated the base through a ventilation shaft, their progress slow and measured. The fortress was a maze of corridors and security checkpoints, but Agent Robertson's intelligence proved accurate. They made their way to the heart of the complex where the bioweapon was housed. As they entered the control room, they came face to face with Krell. The Barzan leader stood before a massive console, his augmented frame casting an imposing shadow. "I wondered when you'd arrive," Krell sneered, his voice a low growl. John stepped forward, his body tensed for action. "It's over, Krell. We know about galactic futures, the experiments, everything." Krell's response was a blur of motion. He lunged at John, his augmented strength propelling him across the room. John reacted instinctively, his own enhanced reflexes allowing him to meet the attack head-on. The two collided in a fierce grapple, their augmented bodies pushing the limits of physical capability. Krell's cybernetic enhancements whirred and clicked as he tried to overpower John, but the human's serum-enhanced muscles held firm. As they struggled, Krell's elbow struck the console. Alarms blared to life, and a holographic display flickered into existence, showing a countdown. "No!" Ivy gasped, rushing to the console. "He's activated the launch sequence!" John's momentary distraction cost him. Krell landed a powerful blow, sending him staggering back. The Barzan leader moved to press his advantage, but John recovered quickly, countering with a series of rapid strikes that forced Krell on the defensive. Ivy's fingers flew over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can't stop it from here," she called out, her voice tight with urgency. "There's a manual override at the launch site, but someone needs to get there fast." John, locked in combat with Krell, made a split-second decision. He feinted left, then delivered a powerful kick that sent Krell crashing into a bank of monitors. Without waiting to see if his opponent would rise, John turned and sprinted towards Ivy. "Show me," he said, glancing at the console. Ivy pointed to a schematic on the screen. Here, the launch bay is 2 levels down. You'll need to disengage the safety protocols and then manually disconnect the payload. John nodded, his mind racing. What about you? I'll try to slow the countdown from here, Ivy said, her fingers already back on the keyboard. Go! With a last look at Krell's prone form, John raced out of the control room. He navigated the fortress's winding corridors, his enhanced senses allowing him to avoid patrols and security measures. As he descended to the launch bay, he heard the sounds of combat echoing through the facility. Agent Robertson's voice crackled over their comm system, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. We're pinned down in the communications center, she reported, her voice strained. Commander Vex and his loyalists have us surrounded. We'll try to transmit what we can to the Galactic Council, but... The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving John with a renewed sense of urgency. He pushed himself harder, his enhanced physiology allowing him to sprint at inhuman speeds. He burst into the launch bay, immediately spotting the bioweapon payload. It was a sleek, missile-like device, primed and ready for deployment. John approached it cautiously, his military training kicking in as he assessed the best way to disarm it. As he worked, he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A group of Krell's soldiers had discovered his location. John's fingers moved faster, racing against time as he disengaged safety protocols and began the delicate process of disconnecting the payload. The first of Krell's soldiers appeared in the doorway, raising their weapon. Before they could fire, a burst of energy struck them from behind. Ivy appeared, her face flushed with exertion. I've got your back, she called out, taking up a defensive position at the entrance. John nodded gratefully, refocusing on the task at hand. The countdown on the payload's display ticked relentlessly downward as he worked to neutralize the threat. With seconds to spare, John severed the final connection. The countdown froze, then blinked out entirely. He allowed himself a moment of relief before turning to assist Ivy. Together, they fought their way back through the fortress, determined to regroup with their allies and bring their evidence to the Galactic Council. As they emerged into the open air, they saw the massive peacekeeping fleet descending from the upper atmosphere. The arrival of the Galactic Council forces threw the battlefield into chaos. Krell's insurgents, the Barzan government troops, and Commander Vex's loyalists all reacted with confusion to this new development. John and Ivy seized the opportunity, making a dash for the Council's landing zone. But their path was far from clear. Ahead, they could see Commander Vex rallying his forces, determined to stop them from reaching the Council representatives. As they prepared to face this new challenge, John felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. His vision blurred, and he stumbled, nearly falling to his knees. "John!" Ivy cried out, supporting him. "What's wrong?" He tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The serum that had enhanced his abilities was now turning against him, threatening to overwhelm his system entirely. Ivy's face set in commitment. "We need to get you help," she said, scanning the chaotic battlefield. "And fast." As they stood on the precipice of this new crisis, the fate of two worlds still hung in the balance. The truth about the conspiracy was within their grasp, but time was running out, not just for their mission, but for John himself. With each passing moment, John's condition deteriorated, the unstable serum coursing through his veins threatening to overwhelm him entirely. Ivy supported John as they made their way across the chaotic battlefield. Explosions rocked the ground around them, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of weapons fire. Through the haze, they spotted a familiar figure sprinting towards them. "Dr. Lyra," Ivy called out, relief evident in her voice. The doctor reached them, her medical kit clutched tightly in her hands. "We need to stabilize him immediately," she said, her eyes scanning John's trembling form. As Dr. Lyra prepared the stabilizing agent, a roar of rage cut through the din of battle. Krell, his cybernetic enhancements glowing with scarcely controlled energy, charged towards them. John, despite his weakened state, pushed Ivy behind him and braced for impact. The two enhanced beings collided with bone-jarring force, their augmented bodies locked in a desperate struggle. As they grappled, John's unstable pheromones began to affect Krell in unexpected ways. The Barzan leader's eyes widened, his expression shifting rapidly from murderous rage to utter confusion. "What? "What's happening to me?" Krell snarled, his grip on John loosening momentarily before tightening again with renewed fury. John, struggling to maintain focus through the haze of his deteriorating condition, used Krell's momentary lapse to gain the upper hand. He twisted, using a combat maneuver honed through years of military training, and managed to pin Krell to the ground. Ivy watched the struggle with mounting anxiety, her gaze darting between the battling pair and Dr. Lyra's swift preparations. "Hurry," she urged the doctor. Just as Dr. Lyra finished preparing the stabilizing agent, a new threat emerged. Commander Vex, his face contorted with desperation, emerged from behind a nearby barricade. In his hand, he clutched a small, ominous-looking device. "You've ruined everything," Vex shouted, his finger hovering over the device's activation switch. "If I can't have control, no one will." Before anyone could react, Vex pressed the button. A fine, barely visible mist began to spread rapidly from the device, engulfing the immediate area. The effect was instantaneous and chaotic. Barzan females in the vicinity suddenly froze, their eyes glazing over as they were overcome by an overwhelming urge. Male Barzans, on the other hand, began to snarl and lash out, their faces twisted with rage and insecurity. Amidst this chaos, a new player entered the field. A sleek, official-looking shuttle descended from the sky, touching down nearby. As its hatch opened, a tall, imposing figure emerged, flanked by a team of heavily armored individuals. "This is Admiral Zara of the Galactic Council," a stern voice boomed across the battlefield. "All hostilities are to cease immediately. Stand down or face the consequences." The Admiral and her team, protected by advanced containment gear, moved swiftly to establish control over the situation. Their presence seemed to give Ivy the opening she needed. With a burst of adrenaline, she sprinted towards John, the stabilizing agent clutched tightly in her hand. Dodging the erratic movements of those affected by the pheromone gas, she reached John just as his struggle with Krell reached its peak. "John," she called out, her voice cutting through his pheromone-induced haze. "Hold on!" With practiced precision, Ivy administered the stabilizing agent. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then John's eyes cleared, his movements becoming more focused and controlled. With his mind no longer clouded by the unstable serum, John's military training took over. In a series of swift, efficient moves, he subdued Krell, pinning the Barzan leader's arms behind his back. As the pheromone gas began to dissipate, Council enforcers moved in, securing Krell and the still-ranting Commander Vex. Dr. Lyra, accompanied by a team of treated Barzan volunteers, approached Admiral Zara with data pads filled with evidence. "Admiral," Dr. Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, "we have proof of a far-reaching conspiracy involving illegal genetic experiments and the true nature of the Barzan crisis." Admiral Zara's stern expression tightened as she scanned the information. "This is most disturbing," she said. "A full quarantine of this area is now in effect. I'm calling an emergency session of the Galactic Council." As the situation on the ground began to stabilize, John and Ivy found themselves ushered towards the Council's command ship. The adrenaline of the battle began to fade, replaced by a wave of exhaustion and relief. In a quiet moment as they boarded the ship, John turned to Ivy. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the unspoken feelings that had been building between them throughout their harrowing journey came to the surface. Without a word, they fell into each other's arms, their embrace conveying everything words couldn't express. The warmth of their bodies pressed together, the racing of their hearts, the mingling of their breath. It all spoke of the deep bond they had forged in the crucible of danger and shared purpose. Their moment of intimacy was cut short by a sudden, blaring alarm. The ship's communications officer's voice rang out, urgent and alarmed. "Admiral Zara, the Barzan homeworld's orbital defense systems have just activated. They're targeting our fleet." John and Ivy broke apart, their expressions mirroring each other's concern. Admiral Zara strode onto the bridge, her face set in unyielding commitment. "It seems Commander Vex had one last card to play," she said, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. "We need to neutralize those defense systems immediately." She turned to John and Ivy. Your unique skills and knowledge of the situation make you invaluable for this mission. Will you assist us? John nodded without hesitation. Of course, Admiral. But Ivy comes too. Her understanding of Barzan technology could be crucial. As the strike team began to assemble, Dr. Lyra approached, her face alight with excitement, despite the dire circumstances. John, Ivy, I've made a remarkable discovery, she said, holding up a data pad. The bond between you two, it's created a unique biochemical synergy. This could be the key to developing a permanent solution for the Barzan crisis. The implications of this discovery hung in the air as John and Ivy boarded the stealth shuttle with Admiral Zara's strike team. As the shuttle's engines hummed to life, preparing for their perilous mission to the Barzan Defense Control Center, John and Ivy exchanged a look filled with drive and newly acknowledged affection. The shuttle lifted off, streaking towards the Barzan homeworld. Inside, the strike team prepared their gear, going over the mission parameters one last time. John felt the familiar pre-mission tension, but this time it was tempered by Ivy's presence at his side and the knowledge that their bond might hold the key to resolving this crisis once and for all. As they approached the planet's atmosphere, the true scale of their challenge became apparent. The orbital defense platforms loomed ahead, their weapons already tracking the Council fleet. Time was running out, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. Balance. The shuttle dove through the Barzan atmosphere, its stealth systems engaged to evade detection. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the craft. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. We've been spotted. Multiple sensor arrays tracking us. John and Ivy exchanged worried glances. Admiral Zara strode to the cockpit, her face grim. It seems Commander Vex anticipated our move. Prepare for emergency landing. The shuttle bucked and weaved, narrowly avoiding bursts of energy from ground-based weapons. With a bone-jarring thud, it touched down on the outskirts of the defense control facility. The strike team poured out, immediately taking cover behind rocky outcroppings as enemy fire peppered their position. John's mind raced, analyzing their options. He turned to Admiral Zara. I can use my enhanced pheromones to create a diversion. It might give us the opening we need. Ivy grabbed his arm, her eyes filled with concern. That's too risky, John. Let me hack their communication systems instead. I can create false alarms, draw their forces away. Before either could act on their plans, a strange sight caught their attention. Several female Barzan soldiers near the facility's entrance suddenly doubled over, clutching their heads. Their male counterparts looked on in confusion, some becoming agitated and aggressive. Dr. Lyra, observing through binoculars, gasped. It's Vex's pheromone gas. It's having an unexpected effect on the Barzan physiology. We need to act fast before the situation spirals out of control. John and Ivy shared a look of understanding. We'll combine our plans, John said. I'll influence the group near the entrance while you create diversions across the compound. Ivy nodded, fingers flying over her portable hacking device. John closed his eyes, concentrating on projecting his pheromones towards the disoriented Barzan soldiers. The effect was immediate. The affected Barzans stumbled away from their posts, some collapsing to the ground. Simultaneously, alarms began blaring across different sectors of the facility, Ivy's handiwork sowing confusion among the defenders. Now's our chance, Admiral Zara commanded. Move in. The strike team surged forward, using the chaos to slip past the outer defenses. They fought their way through scattered resistance, John's enhanced abilities and Ivy's tech skills proving invaluable. As they breached the main control center, they encountered an unexpected figure, a human woman in a lab coat, her eyes wide with surprise. Dr. Kira, Ivy breathed, recognizing the rogue Earth scientist from intelligence briefings. Dr. Kira raised her hands, her voice trembling. I can explain. I've developed a new compound. It could end the Barzan crisis permanently. Before they could question her further, the sound of running footsteps echoed from a nearby corridor. The team took defensive positions as Commander Vex burst into the room, flanked by his cybernetically enhanced guards. You're too late, Vex snarled, his augmented arm transforming into a deadly-looking weapon. I'm going to end this crisis my way. A fierce firefight erupted. John and Ivy moved in perfect sync, covering each other as they pushed towards Vex. The rest of the team engaged the guards, the air filling with the acrid smell of weapons discharge. John finally cornered Vex near a large, ominous-looking device. "It's over, Commander," he said, his enhanced muscles tensed for action. Vex's face contorted with rage. "Never!" He lunged for the device's controls. John tackled him, the two enhanced humans grappling with inhuman strength. As they fought, a stray blast struck the device. A hissing sound filled the air as a shimmering mist began to leak from its damaged containment unit. "No," Dr. Kira cried out. "That's the new compound. It's highly unstable." Ivy, seeing the danger, raced towards the leaking device. She began working feverishly to seal the breach, her fingers dancing over unfamiliar controls. John, still locked in combat with Vex, felt his enhanced senses reeling from the compound's effects. He redoubled his efforts, finally managing to subdue the crazed commander, just as Admiral Zara and her team secured the room. Dr. Lyra hurried to the leaking device, her face pale as she analyzed its contents. This compound, it could alter Barzan physiology permanently, but in its current state, it's too volatile. We need a stabilizing agent. Her eyes widened as realization struck. Human DNA, a specific enzyme in our genetic makeup, could neutralize the compound's dangerous elements. John stepped forward, his teeth clenched. "I'll do it. My enhanced physiology might give us the best chance." Ivy whirled to face him, her eyes filled with fear and something deeper. "John, no, it's too dangerous." But John's mind was made up. He moved toward the swirling mist of the unstable compound. Ivy, torn between duty and her feelings for John, made a split-second decision. She grabbed a nearby medical kit, quickly preparing a syringe with a sample of John's blood. Before anyone could stop her, she plunged the needle into her own arm. "Ivy!" John cried out in shock. She met his gaze, her eyes blazing with grit. "We're in this together. Our biochemical synergy might be the key to stabilizing the compound and saving the Barzan people." Hand in hand, John and Ivy stepped into the shimmering mist. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the two figures now enveloped in the swirling compound. The fate of two species hung in the balance as John and Ivy faced their greatest challenge yet, their intertwined destinies now tied to the future of an entire world. Civilization. As they stepped into the shimmering mist, John and Ivy felt an immediate tingling sensation across their skin. The compound enveloped them, its swirling tendrils seeming to dance around their bodies. Suddenly, a wave of intense heat washed over them. John gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to cry out as his muscles tensed and relaxed in rapid succession. Beside him, Ivy gasped, her eyes widening as her skin began to emit a faint, bluish glow. "John," she whispered, her voice strained, "something's happening." He nodded, unable to speak, as another surge of energy coursed through his body. The sensation alternated between searing pain and waves of euphoria, each pulse more intense than the last. John's enhanced senses went into overdrive, every nerve ending alight with sensation. As they stood, locked in place by the transformative power of the compound, their bodies began to change. The faint glow emanating from their skin intensified, bathing the room in an eerie, pulsating light. John felt his muscles shifting, rearranging themselves in ways he couldn't comprehend. Ivy's hair seemed to float around her head, crackling with static electricity. Outside the contaminated area, Admiral Zara and her team watched in awe and trepidation. Dr. Lyra's fingers flew over her sensors, her face a mask of concentration as she analyzed the data streaming in. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tight with excitement, "the compound is stabilizing, but that's not all. John and Ivy's pheromones are off the charts. They're affecting the Barzan females in the vicinity." As if on cue, several Barzan women who had been writhing in discomfort suddenly straightened, their expressions clearing. One of them, a young soldier, looked around in wonder. "The pain," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's gone." Inside the mist, John and Ivy's transformation reached its peak. Their bodies, now fully adapted to the compound, began to emit a powerful, stabilizing field. The volatile elements in the room rapidly neutralized, the swirling mist dissipating like morning dew under a hot sun. As the air cleared, John and Ivy stood revealed, changed but alive. Their skin still glowed faintly, and subtle alterations in their features hinted at the ordeal they had endured. John's muscles seemed more defined, his posture straighter. Ivy's eyes shimmered with an otherworldly light, her movements fluid and graceful. They looked at each other, a moment of silent communication passing between them. Without a word, they clasped hands, the contact sending a visible surge of energy rippling across their skin. Admiral Zara stepped forward, her face a mix of awe and concern. "Secure the area," she ordered, "and get a medical team in here immediately. We need to contain this situation." As her team sprang into action, sealing off the facility and preparing a quarantine zone, a commotion erupted from the far side of the room. Commander Vex, still restrained, began to thrash violently, his cybernetic augmentations sparking and sputtering. "What's happening to me?" he roared, his voice distorted by malfunctioning vocal implants. "Make it stop!" Dr. Lyra rushed to his side, her scanner whirring as she assessed his condition. "It's the pheromones," she explained, her voice tense. "They're interfering with his cybernetics. His system is overloading." As Vex continued to struggle, his eyes suddenly cleared, a look of horror spreading across his face. "What have I done?" he whispered, the full weight of his actions crashing down upon him. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Zara's communicator crackled to life, the voice of her second-in-command cutting through the chaos. "Admiral, we've got incoming. Galactic Council peacekeepers and a team of xenobiologists. They're requesting immediate access to the facility." Zara nodded grimly. "Grant them clearance. We're going to need all the help we can get." As the situation outside the facility began to stabilize, with reports of Barzan forces laying down their arms filtering in, John and Ivy found themselves being ushered towards a secure medical transport. The realization of what they had done, of the potential consequences of their actions, began to sink in. "What happens now?" Ivy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John squeezed her hand, feeling the pulse of energy that still flowed between them. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever comes next, we face it together." As the transport's doors sealed shut, isolating them from the world they had just transformed, John and Ivy exchanged a look of commitment. They had saved a species, perhaps two, but at what cost to themselves? As the transport lifted off, heading towards an uncertain future, they knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. As the transport lifted off, John and Ivy felt a sudden lurch. The vessel shuddered violently, alarms blaring throughout the cabin. "We've lost primary thrusters," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Brace for impact." John instinctively pulled Ivy close, their bodies glowing faintly as adrenaline surged through their systems. The transport careened toward the ground, the hull groaning under the strain. With a deafening crash, they slammed into the surface of the Barzan homeworld. Metal twisted and glass shattered as the vessel skidded across rocky terrain before coming to a halt. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping coolant and the crackle of sparking wires. John blinked, his enhanced senses quickly adjusting to the dim emergency lighting. He turned to Ivy, relief washing over him as he saw her stirring beside him. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping her to her feet. Ivy nodded, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "I think so, but the others—" They moved swiftly through the damaged transport, their newfound strength allowing them to easily shift debris. They found the pilot and co-pilot unconscious but alive, carefully extracting them from the crushed cockpit. As they emerged from the wreckage, the harsh Barzan landscape stretched before them. Jagged rock formations loomed in the distance, while strange, twisted vegetation dotted the barren ground. "Communications are down," Ivy reported, examining a salvaged datapad. "And we're way off course. This area isn't even mapped in detail." John surveyed their surroundings, his enhanced vision picking up movement in the shadows. "We can't stay here. It's not safe." They fashioned makeshift stretchers for the injured crew and set off, guided by John's heightened instincts. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, both he and Ivy noticed changes in their perception. Colors seemed more vivid, sense more potent. They could sense the vibrations of distant rockfalls and the heartbeats of small creatures scurrying for cover. Most strikingly, they felt a deep, almost visceral connection to each other and the world around them. "John," Ivy whispered, her voice tight with concern, "I can feel your anxiety. It's like it's my own." He nodded, understanding. "I know, it's the same for me. We need to stay focused." As night fell, they found shelter in a shallow cave. While tending to the injured crew members, John and Ivy discussed their situation in hushed tones. "Someone will come for us," Ivy said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. John frowned, his enhanced hearing picking up distant, unsettling sounds. "Maybe, but we can't count on it. We need to find our way back to civilization." A loud screech echoed through the night, causing them both to tense. John moved to the cave entrance, his eyes piercing the darkness. He saw shapes moving in the distance, large predatory forms unlike anything he'd encountered before. "We're not alone out here," he said grimly. As dawn broke, they set out again, John and Ivy taking turns carrying the stretchers. Their progress was slow but steady, their enhanced strength and endurance proving invaluable. By midday, they crested a hill and spotted a column of smoke rising in the distance. Approaching cautiously, they discovered a small settlement of primitive dwellings. The inhabitants, Barzan, who appeared different from those they'd encountered before, emerged warily. An elderly female, her face etched with intricate markings, stepped forward. "I am Nara," she said in halting standard. "You are different, not like others who sometimes pass through." John and Ivy exchanged glances, unsure how to explain their unique situation. Before they could respond, one of the injured crew members groaned in pain. Nara's eyes widened. "You bring wounded. Come, we will help." As they entered the village, John and Ivy felt a strange resonance with their surroundings. The plants seemed to lean towards them, and the villagers' eyes were drawn to their faintly glowing skin. Nara led them to a large hut filled with aromatic herbs and glowing crystals. As she began treating the injured crew, she studied John and Ivy intently. "Your scent," she said, her nostrils flaring. "It speaks of great change, of power. You have been touched by the ancient forces?" Ivy leaned forward, intrigued. "Ancient forces? What do you mean?" Nara smiled mysteriously. "There is much you do not know about your connection to our world. Rest now. When the moons align, I will show you." As John and Ivy settled into the village, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of uncovering something momentous. Yet even as they found a moment of respite, unknown to them, 3 separate groups were converging on their location, each with their own agenda. In the gathering dusk, Krell and his band of altered Barzan picked up John and Ivy's scent, their eyes gleaming with malevolent purpose. Miles away, Admiral Zara's rescue team fought through electromagnetic interference, determined to reach their missing comrades. And on the horizon, an Earth delegation approached, their orders to retrieve the transformed humans by any means necessary. The stage was set for a clash that would shape the future of 2 worlds. As night fell on the Barzan homeworld, John and Ivy stood at the center of a gathering storm, unaware of the forces about to collide around them. As John and Ivy contemplated their next move, a commotion erupted at the edge of the village. Shouts and screams pierced the air, followed by the sound of breaking wood and shattering pottery. John's enhanced senses picked up the distinctive scent of altered Barzan before he saw them. "Ivy," he said urgently, "we've got company." They rushed towards the disturbance, their bodies instinctively moving in perfect synchronization. As they rounded a cluster of huts, they saw a group of Barzan, their bodies twisted and bulging with unnatural muscle, tearing through the village. At the head of the group stood a towering figure, his eyes wild with rage and something else, a hunger that sent chills down John's spine. "Krell," John muttered, recognizing the leader from briefings back on the station. Panic spread through the village as primitive Barzan fled from the intruders. Nara emerged from her hut, her face set in unyielding commitment. "You must go," she said to John and Ivy. "They seek you." But retreat wasn't in their nature. John and Ivy exchanged a quick glance, a whole conversation passing between them in an instant. They nodded in unison and stepped forward to face the threat. "Everyone, fall back!" John shouted, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even him. The villagers responded instinctively, moving behind John and Ivy as they took up defensive positions. Krell's eyes locked onto them, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "The source," he growled. "Give yourselves to us, and we'll spare these primitives." "Not a chance," Ivy retorted, her body tensing for action. As Krell's group advanced, the sound of engines filled the air. A sleek transport ship bearing Galactic Council insignia descended from the clouds, touching down at the village's edge. Admiral Zara emerged, flanked by a team of armed peacekeepers and Dr. Lara, who clutched a case of scientific equipment. "Stand down," Zara's voice boomed across the village. "By order of the Galactic Council, cease all hostilities immediately." The situation teetered on a knife's edge. Krell's followers hesitated, caught between their leader's rage and the sudden arrival of authority. John and Ivy used the moment of confusion to their advantage, moving swiftly to organize the villagers into a more defensible formation. Before anyone could react further, another ship appeared on the horizon. Unlike the sleek lines of the Galactic Council vessel, this one was bulky and utilitarian, bearing the unmistakable markings of an Earth diplomatic corps. As the Earthship landed, disgorging a group of stern-faced individuals led by a man whose very posture screamed politician, the sky above them began to darken. What had been a clear day moments ago was now overshadowed by roiling clouds crackling with energy. Dr. Lyra's equipment began to spark and smoke. "Electromagnetic storm," she shouted, frantically trying to salvage her devices. "All advanced tech will be useless." The storm hit with the force of a hammer blow. Lightning arced across the sky, and a wave of energy washed over the village, frying circuitry and plunging them into a primitive darkness. In the chaos that followed, Krell seized his chance. "Take them," he roared, charging towards John and Ivy with his followers close behind. John and Ivy moved as one, their bodies glowing faintly as they tapped into their newfound abilities. They met Krell's charge head-on, their enhanced strength and reflexes allowing them to hold their own against the altered Barzan. Admiral Zara and her team joined the fray, forced to rely on hand-to-hand combat without their energy weapons. The primitive Barzan, inspired by John and Ivy's bravery, grabbed whatever weapons they could find, spears, clubs, farming tools, and entered the battle. As the melee raged, John and Ivy found themselves fighting back-to-back, their movements perfectly synchronized. They could sense each other's intentions, reacting to threats before they fully materialized. "John," Dr. Lyra called out, fighting her way towards them with a vial of glowing liquid. "I've developed a stabilizing agent, but it needs direct contact." Understanding immediately, John grabbed the vial. He and Ivy began moving through the battlefield, touching affected Barzan as they fought. Wherever their hands made contact, the altered Barzan seemed to calm, their aggressive behavior subsiding. The effect was dramatic. Krell's followers, receiving the treatment, began to lay down their weapons, looking around in confusion as if waking from a dream. The primitive Barzan, seeing this transformation, began to chant and bow towards John and Ivy, viewing them as divine healers. Krell, seeing his army crumble around him, let out a primal scream of rage. He charged at John and Ivy, his massive form barreling through friend and foe alike. John met his rush, grappling with the enraged Barzan while Ivy uncapped the vial of stabilizing agent. In a move of desperate strength, John managed to pin Krell's arms, leaving him exposed. Ivy pressed her hand, coated in the glowing liquid, against Krell's chest. The effect was immediate and violent. Krell's body convulsed, his muscles rippling as the agent worked through his system. With a final guttural cry, he collapsed to the ground, twitching uncontrollably. As quickly as it had begun, the battle was over. The altered Barzan, now docile, were rounded up by Admiral Zara's team. The primitive villagers gathered around John and Ivy, touching them reverently and offering prayers of thanks. Amidst the aftermath, the Earth delegation approached, led by the stern-faced man who introduced himself as Senator Hawkins. "John, Ivy," he said, his voice cold and authoritative, "by order of Earth Command, you are to return with us immediately for debriefing and examination." Before John or Ivy could respond, Admiral Zara stepped between them. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Senator. These individuals are now under Galactic Council protection, pending further investigation into recent events." Hawkins's face reddened with anger. "Now see here!" But his words were cut off as Nara approached, her aged face serene despite the chaos around her. "Perhaps," she said, her voice carrying a weight of ancient wisdom, "it is time for all to sit and speak. There is much to discuss, and much that has been hidden for too long." As the groups reluctantly agreed to negotiate, John and Ivy found themselves at the center of a storm of competing interests. The fate of two worlds and possibly the entire galaxy hung in the balance, and their next decision would shape the course of history. They looked at each other, their connection humming with unspoken words and shared purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their bond transcending the boundaries of their original species and opening up possibilities beyond imagination. As night fell on the Barzan world, the village became a crucible of interstellar diplomacy. In a circle of flickering torchlight, representatives from Earth, Barzan, and the Galactic Council gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow emanating from John and Ivy's skin. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from this unprecedented meeting. As night fell on the Barzan world, the village became a crucible of interstellar diplomacy. In a circle of flickering torchlight, representatives from Earth, Barzan, and the Galactic Council gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow emanating from John and Ivy's skin. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from this unprecedented meeting. As the negotiations stretched into the early hours of the morning, John and Ivy found themselves at the center of heated debates. Senator Hawkins argued vehemently for their immediate return to Earth, while Admiral Zara countered with claims of Galactic Council jurisdiction. The Barzan representatives, both primitive and advanced, watched the proceedings with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Throughout the discussions, John and Ivy remained silent, their hands intertwined as they listened to the arguments swirling around them. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, they exchanged a long look, communicating without words. With a shared nod, they stood, drawing all eyes to them. "We've made our decision," John announced, his voice steady and clear. "We're staying here on the Barzan homeworld." A ripple of shock passed through the assembled delegates. Senator Hawkins' face reddened with anger, while Admiral Zara's eyebrows rose in surprise. Nara, the elderly Barzan healer, smiled knowingly. Ivy stepped forward, her skin pulsing with a soft light. "Our unique condition isn't just a quirk of fate. It's the key to resolving this crisis and forging a new era of cooperation between humans and Barzan." Their announcement sent shockwaves through the diplomatic circle. Arguments erupted, voices rising in a cacophony of protest and support. But John and Ivy stood firm, their tenacity unwavering. In the days that followed, a flurry of activity transformed the primitive Barzan village. Under Dr. Lyra's guidance, a state-of-the-art laboratory took shape, its sleek lines and advanced technology contrasting sharply with the surrounding mud-brick huts. Nara worked alongside the scientific team, sharing ancient Barzan wisdom that proved invaluable to their research. John and Ivy threw themselves into the work, their unique physiology providing crucial insights. They spent long hours in the lab, analyzing data and running experiments. As weeks turned into months, their efforts began to bear fruit. Dr. Lyra made breakthrough after breakthrough, each one bringing them closer to a permanent solution for the Barzan physiological instability. During this time, John and Ivy's bond deepened. Their shared experiences and the unique connection forged by their transformation drew them closer together. Late one night, as they walked hand in hand under the light of Barzan's twin moons, Ivy placed John's hand on her abdomen. "John," she whispered, her eyes shining, "I'm pregnant." The news spread quickly, igniting a firestorm of excitement and concern across two worlds. The possibility of a human Barzan hybrid child captured the imagination of scientists and civilians alike. As Ivy's belly swelled with new life, the stakes of their mission grew even higher. Dr. Lyra redoubled her efforts, working tirelessly to develop a treatment that would stabilize the Barzan physiology. She combined elements of John and Ivy's altered DNA with enzymes found in native Barzan flora, creating a gene therapy that showed immense promise. The first trials of the new treatment exceeded all expectations. Barzan females who received the therapy regained their independence, no longer bound by the need for regular milking. The success drew the attention of the Galactic Council, who fast-tracked approval for widespread distribution. Admiral Zara personally oversaw the logistics of administering the treatment across the Barzan homeworld. As the crisis began to abate, a new spirit of cooperation emerged between humans and Barzan. The primitive tribe that had sheltered John and Ivy played a crucial role in bridging cultural divides, with Nara becoming a respected advisor to diplomats from both worlds. As Ivy's due date approached, the anticipation reached a fever pitch. The impending birth of the first human Barzan hybrid child became a symbol of hope for a shared future. John and Ivy found themselves at the center of a media frenzy, their every move scrutinized by an eager public on both Earth and Barzan. The day of reckoning arrived with little warning. Ivy woke in the pre-dawn hours, her body racked with contractions. John sprang into action, alerting Dr. Lyra and the medical team they had assembled for this moment. The birth was not without complications. The hybrid nature of the child presented unique challenges that pushed the boundaries of both human and Barzan medical knowledge. For hours, John stood by Ivy's side, holding her hand as she fought through the pain. Dr. Lyra coordinated a team of experts from both species, their combined efforts focused on ensuring a safe delivery. As the Barzan sun reached its zenith, a new cry pierced the air. After an intense and emotional ordeal, Ivy gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The child, whom they named Aurora, was a perfect blend of both species. Her skin held a subtle luminescence reminiscent of the Barzan, while her eyes displayed the varied colors typical of humans. News of Aurora's birth spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Celebrations erupted on both the Barzan homeworld and Earth. As John and Ivy cradled their newborn daughter, they were surrounded by a diverse group of well-wishers: Admiral Zara, Dr. Lyra, Nara, and representatives from Earth, Barzan, and the Galactic Council. The image of this unique family became a powerful symbol of unity and hope. It represented not just the resolution of a crisis, but the dawn of a new age of galactic cooperation. As John and Ivy gazed down at their daughter, they knew that their incredible journey had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, as Aurora grew stronger, the impact of their work continued to ripple outward. The once critical milking centers were repurposed as cultural exchange hubs and research facilities. Human scientists flocked to the Barzan homeworld, eager to learn from their advanced biotechnology, while Barzan students and diplomats made their way to Earth. Even Krell, the once aggressive leader of the altered Barzan, underwent a profound transformation. Recovering from his exposure to the concentrated stabilizing agent, he volunteered to be a test subject for reversing the harmful genetic modifications made by galactic futures. His journey from villain to ally became a testament to the power of redemption and the potential for change. As Aurora took her first steps in a world forever altered by her parents' actions, John and Ivy watched with pride. They had become respected leaders in the interspecies community, their unique perspective bridging gaps between human and Barzan society. Their daughter's existence represented the culmination of their incredible journey and the promise of an even brighter future. The sun set on this new world, casting long shadows across a landscape where humans and Barzan now worked and lived side by side. John and Ivy stood hand in hand, their skin glowing softly in the fading light. As they watched Aurora play with a group of human and Barzan children, they knew that the crisis that had once threatened to tear them apart had instead forged an unbreakable bond between their species. The galaxy looked to this small family with hope, seeing in them the potential for a future filled with unlimited possibilities and newfound understanding. As the first stars began to twinkle in the Barzan sky, John, Ivy, and Aurora represented not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of an entirely new story, one that promised to reshape the very fabric of galactic society.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.